fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver, the Lone Ranger. With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early western United States. Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. From out of the past come the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse Silver. The Lone Ranger rides again.
Come on, Silver. Let's go, big fella. I'll Silver. Aye!
On the maps of New Mexico, the desert that stretches for 90 miles south of San Marcial is called Jornada del Muerto, which in English means the journey of the dead man. And this may be the reason for the name. With only a few exceptions, the entire male population of San Marcial was crowded inside the local cafe. Eddie Southern worked his way up to the bar and had to chuckle when he found himself standing next to the marshal.
Howdy, Marshal.
Howdy, stranger. Which way'd you come from?
The North?
See any signs of Apaches?
I haven't seen anybody since I left Socorro.
That's good. Had a little excitement earlier this afternoon.
Oh? Indians?
No, just one. Came riding into town big as life. Walked straight into my office, tells me I should give him a wagon and 2 mules so as he could cross the desert to Las Cruces. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know what to think of it.
Well, he was weaving back and forth, so I figured he was drunk. And I'd have sent him on his way if it hadn't have been for Pedro Gonzalez. Now, Pedro, you're sure about that Indian?
Oh, see. I am on this stage when it is held up 3 weeks ago. And the Indian you ever lock up is one of those who stole the gold from the stage.
Yeah, he seems to be pretty old for anything like that.
Oh, you have only seen him when he is full of the firewater. I have seen him in action. He's a bad one. He's a mescalero Apache, and they're all bad.
I've heard just the opposite.
Oh, then you hear wrong. Marshal, you should hang him from the big tree by the river.
Hold-up took place in Valencia County. I'll have to send him to Lunas.
Oh, you deputize me, I take him.
Tomorrow soon enough.
All right. Anytime you say, I take him.
Marshal.
Yeah, kid.
What's that? What'd you call me?
No offense. You are pretty young.
Yeah. Even so, would you mind taking some advice from me?
What about?
The mescaleros. They've signed a treaty with the government, but they're mighty touchy. If you were to put one of them in jail without having a good reason, they could make plenty of trouble. I'll see you when the shooting starts, Marshal.
Oh, that smart-aleck kid. What's he know about Indians?
Mescalero stronghold was in the foothills of the San Andres Mountains to the east of San Marcial. Just as night was falling, Tonto drew rein on the ridge above the village. All the braves of the tribe were gathered around young Juan, the grandson of the chief, who was standing on a mound of earth in front of the chief's hut. Tonto crept down the slope until he could hear everything that was being said. Luzito, the chief, ill and trying to reach the hospital in Las Cruces, had ridden into town to ask for the loan of a horse and wagon. He had been thrown into jail.
Me look through window, see Luzito in room with bars. Him lie on bed, but him not answer when one call him. Americanos, make Luzito prisoner. Americanos, not friends of Indians. You fellow want to town? Free Luzito? We go. Make big fire. Make big war dance. Burn town. Kill all Americanos. Bring Luzito.
This plenty bad. Me tell Lone Ranger.
Tonto rode swiftly to the Lone Ranger's camp on the bank of the river north of San Marcial.
Oscar, ho, fella. Easy, fella.
Well, Tonto, have the Indians seen anything of the man we're looking for?
Me not go to village. You listen, Kimasabi.
Tonto reported everything he had heard at the Indian stronghold. When he had finished, the Lone Ranger called to Silver.
Here, Silver.
You go to town?
We must, Kimasabi. Easy, steady, boy.
But them not know you there.
Luzito must be freed before the Indians attack.
Maybe Marshal will think you outlaw. Now, listen.
He'll listen, steady, Silver. It has to be at the point of a gun.
Why him put Luzito in jail? Luzito friend Americans.
Yes, and it's only his influence that's kept the young braves of his tribe in check. There, are you ready?
Be ready,
Easy,
Kimasabi.
steady, big fella. One, Silver!
Let's count.
The Lone Ranger and Tonto left Silver and Scout at the edge of town and kept to the shadows as they made their way down the main street to the marshal's office. They stopped at the window before entering. A rather young man was sitting behind the marshal's desk, cleaning his gun.
That not Marshal Kimasabi. Him wear deputy badge.
Come on.
Leave it. Yes, a masked man, an Indian.
You're covered. Put your gun on the desk and don't raise your voice.
My gun isn't loaded. I was cleaning.
I'll take it.
There, Luzito, in cell.
Let's have the keys, Deputy.
You're friends of that road agent.
What road agent?
The old Indian.
That old Indian is the chief of the Mescalero tribe. Now the keys.
Here. But you never get away with this.
Keep him covered, Tonto.
Me do it.
Luzito. Luzito, open your eyes. You remember me?
You tell me it good thing signed treaty with Americanos. Americanos friends. That not true.
Why did they lock you up?
Gonzales tell Marshal me road agent.
Gonzales is the man you drove out of your camp.
Him bring firewater.
Why didn't you tell the marshal who you really were?
Much pain. It hard stand up. Hard talk.
Never mind. We'll have things straightened out in a few minutes.
Kimasabi, there are many men outside.
Oh, see your gun, Tonto.
Up with your hands, you dirty renegades.
Our hands are up, Marshal, but you better listen to us, or not one of you will be alive by morning.
The curtain falls on the first act of our Lone Ranger adventure. Before the next exciting scenes, please permit us to pause for just a few moments. trial to continue. A dozen men forced their way into the office after the marshal, among them Gonzalez and Eddie Southern. The deputy took the Lone Ranger's and Tonto's guns.
Marshal, masked man says the old Indian is the chief of the Mescaleros.
That's true. What's more, the tribe knows you're holding him prisoner, and they mean to attack the town.
What? No, it's a lie. The old man is an outlaw, and so are these two. Look, the mask. Lock them both up.
There's one man here who knows I'm not an outlaw.
I'm the man he's talking about, Marshal.
You, Bud. You know this man?
Yeah. He's been trailing me for the past 3 weeks.
Huh?
You know why, Eddie?
No, not really. There's no reward out for me, but of course that wouldn't matter to you. I suppose you simply want to bring me to justice.
Justice, Eddie? Yes. But justice for you. If you leave the country, you'll be outside the law for the rest of your life. I want you to return to Santa Fe and stand trial. There's every chance you'll be acquitted. There are half a dozen men who'll swear you shot in self-defense when you killed Ace Gordon.
You mean that?
I do.
Killed Ace Gordon. Why, this must be the Santa Fe kid.
That's right.
Well, I have a wanted notice for you.
I have it in my pocket now.
Why, you...
Steady does it, Marshal. I'm not surrendering to you. I'm surrendering to the masked man.
I'm the law officer here.
He's the Lone Ranger.
No, do not believe him.
You keep quiet, Gonzalez. You've caused enough trouble already. You do believe me, don't you, Marshal?
I don't know.
Well, you better make up your mind and fast. Now, listen, I didn't have to identify myself. If there'd been anyone else here to vouch for the masked man, I wouldn't have. I've given myself up to the law to save this town from a massacre. To convince you this man is the Lone Ranger and that his word can't be doubted. If he says the old Indian is Lozito, the chief of the Mescaleros, he is. If he says the tribe means to attack, they do.
I believe you. Is there anything to be done, mister?
The first thing to do is to lock up Gonzalez.
No, let me out of here.
Hold him, Jack.
I've got him.
He lied about Lozito to get even with him.
No.
Gonzalez was thrown out of the Mescalero camp for selling whiskey to the Indians. That's a federal offense. He should be held here until a United States Marshal arrives to take him into custody.
Lock him up, deputy.
Sure thing. Come on, you.
No, wait a minute.
But the attack, what about that?
You must prove you're friendly to the Mescaleros.
How?
Well, Lozito asked for a wagon and mule so he could be driven across the desert to the hospital in Las Cruces. Give them to him.
Sure. Lige, you have a wagon and mules. Get him here as fast as you can.
Lozito doesn't want any trouble. When he realizes you're doing your best to make amends for the way you've treated him, he'll cooperate. When Juan and the warriors show up here, you'll send them home.
Who'll drive him to Las Cruces?
I shall. I know the doctor in charge of the hospital. Oh, you'll come with Tonto and me, Eddie.
Whatever you say, mister.
Will it help any if I apologize to the chief?
It may. Come along.
The marshal followed the Lone Ranger and Tonto to Lozito's cell at the rear of the office. A great change had come over the old chief. His body had stiffened. His eyes were closed.
Why, he's dead.
The Lone Ranger knelt beside the cot and lifted the chief's hand. The skin was cold. He was unable to feel any pulse. There was no perceptible breathing. The masked man pressed back an eyelid, lit a match, and held it close to the eye.
He's dead. Now what'll we do?
He isn't dead. The pupil of the eye is closing.
He's as good as dead?
No. The muscles have become rigid. The heartbeat and the breathing are far below normal. But there's every possibility he'll recover. There's no telling how long this condition will last, though.
And no telling how long before you'll be able to talk to the Indians. Who's to stop him from attacking the town now?
You are, Marshal.
Me?
Yes. Well, is the wagon here yet?
It just drove up.
Good. Fill 2 large casks full of water and make a bed for the chief.
Right, we'll take care of it right now.
You're leaving before the Indians arrive?
More than likely, they'll not show up before morning. The chief must get to the hospital as quickly as possible. Marshal, when the Indians do arrive, you must ride out to meet them alone, with your hand held high.
Sign the peace.
They'll not do anything until they've heard what you have to say.
What shall I say?
Tell them Gonzalez is in jail, and the chief is on his way to Las Cruces.
Well, they'll go after you.
Let them. All right, give me a hand, Tonto.
The desert was crossed that night. At noon the next day, the Lone Ranger, Tonto, and the kid made camp in a grove of trees 10 miles from Las Cruces. Tonto watched their back trail constantly, and at 2 o'clock he pointed to a cloud of dust in the distance.
Mescaleros come, Kimasabi.
Yes, I was hoping we'd reach Las Cruces before they caught up with us. But the mules couldn't go on without a rest. Oh, Is there any change in the chief, kid?
None at all.
Too bad.
The mescaleros thundered to a stop at the edge of the grove, and riding beside Juan was Crazy Wolf, one of the renegade Geronimo's lieutenants. Juan and Crazy Wolf dismounted and walked toward the wagon where the Lone Ranger, Tonto, and the kid were waiting for them.
Crazy Wolf. This explains why Juan is so anxious for a fight.
Where, Luzito?
You should be more careful of the company you keep, Juan.
Where, Luzito?
He's in the wagon.
The young Indian touched his grandfather's cheek and then drew back his hand quickly.
Him dead.
No, Juan.
Why you do this?
Do what?
Luzito die in town. You take him away so Indian not find him.
We're taking him to the hospital in Las Cruces.
Hospital no good for dead man. You take him home, Juan, bury him. Then come back, burn town.
The doctors in Las Cruces will make him well.
Him dead?
All right, if that's what you want to believe, he's dead. But the doctors in Las Cruces can make great magic. They'll bring your grandfather back to life.
Them no can do that.
I say they can. You want to lose your grandfather, Juan?
No.
Then pay no attention to Crazy Wolf and give me a chance to prove I'm telling the truth.
Juan was silent, staring at the chief. At last he turned to the masked man.
You take him. But Indian follow you. Camp round Las Cruces.
You not tell truth. All Americano die.
That's right. All Americans die.
That evening, Luzito was admitted to the hospital, and the mescaleros encircled the town. All night long, the Lone Ranger waited outside the chief's room, while the doctor and his assistants worked over the old man. At last, shortly before dawn, the doctor joined the masked man.
Well, Doctor?
We've won.
He's conscious?
Yes, and he'll recover.
How soon will he be able to speak with his grandson?
Well, he can do that right now.
Good. I'll bring him here. Oh, easy, steady, big fella.
It was still dark when the Lone Ranger dismounted at the edge of the woods where Juan was camped and started through the trees. Suddenly, Silver whinnied in alarm. Instinctively, the Lone Ranger dropped to the ground. A knife sailed over his shoulder and quivered in the trunk of a tree just beyond him. Before he could regain his feet, Crazy Wolf was on top of him, and the Indian's arm clamped around his throat like a vice.
Me know why you come here. Luzito live. But you never tell Juan. Me tell him old chief dead, start war.
The Lone Ranger summoned all his strength, gripped the renegade's wrist, and slowly forced it back. With his free hand, the Indian pulled the Lone Ranger's gun from his holster. But before he could level it, the masked man whirled and drove a solid right to Crazy Wolf's jaw. Crazy Wolf crashed to the ground, but he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, and the masked man leaped on top of him and wrenched the gun from his grasp. Then he pulled the renegade to his feet, and his right fist found its mark on Crazy Wolf's jaw once more.
You take it.
This time, the Indian dropped to the earth unconscious. The Lone Ranger holstered his gun, picked up Crazy Wolf, and carried him on to Juan's camp.
Masked man, come. What you do to Crazy Wolf?
He tried to kill me. I knocked him out. I'm taking him in to the sheriff. He'll be put in jail.
Why him try kill you?
He must have guessed I was bringing you good news, and he didn't want you to hear it.
What do you mean, good news?
Your grandfather can talk to you now. Go to him, Juan.
Me not believe you. This sound like trick. You not tell truth. Indian take you prisoner. You die by fire.
Go to your grandfather, Juan.
At the hospital,
this one, Luzito. You come back.
Doctor tell me you listen to Crazy Wolf, make plenty trouble.
Crazy Wolf try kill Masked Man. Him in jail now.
That good. You take Mescalero home. Doctor make Luzito well.
Me glad Americano make big magic. Me glad Masked Man tell truth. Me do what you say.
That good.
Within 2 weeks, Luzito had recovered completely and returned to his stronghold. A month later, Eddie Southern, who had been acquitted at his trial in Santa Fe and was on his way to El Paso to join the army, stopped at the Indian village to pay his respects. He was treated royally, and Juan was reluctant to see him go.
You rest one more day before you make Journey of Dead Man.
Journey of the Dead Man? What's that?
That's what Indian call desert now. Them say Luzito dead when masked friend take him to Las Cruces.
Well,
Me not know. But me know this, at bad time. Luzito die, many men die, if they're not friend like him. All Indian thank Great Spirit for help of Lone Ranger.
This is a feature of the Lone Ranger Incorporated, created by George W. Trendle, produced by Trendle Campbell Muir Incorporated, directed by Charles D. Livingston, and edited by Fran Stryker. The part of the Lone Ranger is played by Brace Beamer.